Hi, I'm Sami, and this is the Career Kickstart Show. And today's guest is Shana Sumers. And I'm excited about this episode because Shana doesn't just have a very interesting career story. She is also the head of community at the Her Social app, which is a social app for queer women. And she's not just somebody who does community. She's not just in tech. She's also a career changer. So she's a Black queer woman career changer going into tech from musical therapy. So she is like kind of a unicorn in the tech world, I believe, and I would just love to get more from Shana, and we're gonna pick her brain. So Shana, before I just ramble, I guess, could you introduce yourself and just share a little bit, like your elevator pitch, just a little bit about you?
Sure. Yes, like you said, hi, I'm Shana. I'm the head of community for Her, largest app for LGBTQ plus women and queer people. Basically, I have a very interesting career path that started in a completely opposite direction, and I kind of stumbled my way into working fully in tech. So it's been very interesting going through and experiencing this space as a queer woman of color, from going from a therapeutic background and working with different backgrounds of populations and things to going to this whole tech background where it's a lot of bro-y spaces and people who think high and mighty of themselves, to going in here and kind of navigating that as well. So it's been two completely different areas that I've been able to kind of bring together to help encourage community and just have people embrace who they are in different spaces that people try to make you not feel comfortable in.
Yeah, and you have been able to go into a lot of different communities. Like, just to start us off, you got your degree in music therapy, and then you got a master's degree in special education in Australia.
Mm-hmm. It was great. It was one of those things where I was like, look, if I'm going to go back and get my master's, I don't need it fully for teaching. So with music therapy, the great thing is that you can go and get your master's in a field that you kind of want to work in. So I knew I wanted to be a music therapist in schools. So I went to get my special education degree to help that. And then I switched over to doing it outside the US, because in the US, it's kind of a requirement to go along like a teaching track. And if I went in Australia, I could still gain the skills that I needed, but I didn't have to do any of the field placement. I didn't have to do any of those things. So I got to kind of make an excuse and go overseas and have a great time in Australia and then come back here and continue.
And after you got done working in Australia, you were like a camp counselor. Was it like, Camp Rock Band or High School Musical? Because I've worked with teens, but I feel like working with dramatic teens, that must have been something.
It was more think Parent Trap circa Lindsay Lohan. It was more like that.
Ooh.
And I had worked at the camp 2 years before, and then they found out that I was back in between my master's and finding my next job. And so they were like, hey, are you doing anything for the summer? Come back and be a program director. Before, I had been a forest counselor, but the camp was all like outdoors. So we had rock climbing, we had horseback riding, we played sports, we had a whole performing arts program. So I helped with performing arts, and then I was a program director and oversaw all of performing arts, as well as 2 units of our teenagers. So I was overseeing them and making sure that, all girls in the summer with no cell phone service, you got to entertain them somehow.
Yeah, I am very impressed. And one thing that I've noticed when we look at your kind of background is that you have been part of these sort of micro communities, whether being like an American expat, studying in Australia, to being a camp counselor, trying to keep all these girls in check and everything like that. Did you feel like there was foreshadowing in your future work, or did it feel like, oh my God, this is just a bunch of random stuff I found myself in?
I think in the moment, I definitely thought it was just a bunch of like random stuff that I did. But as I've come into this job, before I was like, I love kids. I like working with kids. Kids are great. And now I'm working with more adults, and the narrative has kind of switched from like, I like working with kids and I like interacting and engaging with them, to I like just engaging with people and seeing their experiences and going through that has just kind of like blossomed into that. But I've always been told that like, I'm one of the people who's just good with people. I just understand different types of people. I like being around people, unless it's first thing in the morning, don't talk to me. But otherwise, like, I think it's just one of those things that I kind of fell into.
Do you think that, because you did a transition into tech, you're not in a, I guess, quote unquote tech role, but you're working for an app. Do you feel like those social skills? Because, I work with a lot of tech professionals, and a lot of career changers don't always believe me that those soft skills and communication can be important. Did you find that being this like non-tech person with these social skills, that was something that made you stand out? Or do you feel like you had to maybe fight to make those transferable skills noticed?
I would say it's probably like 70-30. When I came in for my team is amazing here, and they definitely utilize the things that I could do when it did come to people. I was like, we're working with a niche community, and to be able to communicate using the correct terms, LGBTQ plus community is full of a whole alphabet of things, and being able to like engage with those people and know how to connect with them in all different ways was very valuable and helped us move forward and kind of make bigger strides in what we wanted to do when we were talking to the community and being able to have those connections. But I also do see the switch when you're trying to like grow community and do this, and you're kind of fighting for your product, but the usability of the app has to come first, and then the money making part of the app has to come next, and all of these different things have to come. So you're kind of pushing for community, and a lot of the times articles that I read that other community managers are doing, they are also fighting to grow that community. But the great thing is that the people inside our community are help making it worth it. So then when we're like, hey, this is actually what's beneficial, and hey, this is the feedback that they're giving, you find those moments to be like, hey, this is why it's valuable, then people get the buy-in very quickly, and you can kind of like work your way up.
Do you feel like when you transition to tech, because it's a big career jump that you did from music therapy to tech, what advice would you give somebody who is trying to do a career change that dramatic?
Yeah, one, that it's okay to be terrified. I definitely was when I moved up here, and I was just like, I don't know what I'm diving into. I had been with the company like voluntarily, and then I moved into a contract, and then we got into a full-time position. And it's okay to just like fully be scared and ask a million questions, like your first steps in. But the key thing that I would say is harboring those skills that you got before. It's not like you were just sitting and doing nothing. You had a career before that for whatever reason you were okay with switching, or it didn't like fulfill you in the ways that you wanted, but you had gained skills and you gained knowledge and things that can probably be carried over into a lot of different spaces. So harboring those to get the first things done that will make you feel comfortable in those first few steps, and then being able to move into those like uncomfortable spaces makes it a lot easier, because it's like you've already jumped in and been able to like hit the ground running and try to accomplish these goals that you've set for yourself in the start. And then you got that down, cool, I know what I'm doing, take it to the next step, take it to the next level. But harness those skills that you had and use them in all of these spaces.
I like that you talk about skill building, but I really like that you talk about the place that fear has in when people are doing a career change, where you have to put that in the back seat. Now, for you, since you talk about your team and everything like that, I can tell that community is really big for you. Can you explain what the value that you find in community and in building communities and just being a part of them? Since tech can feel kind of like a silo sometimes, how people work.
Oh, definitely. But even within tech, I think that's where I found probably some of the most community. And when I say that to people, they're always very surprised. But there's always these groups like, her is a startup. But I go to these bigger companies that are hosting these free events that bring together all of these amazing people. And you just walk in and the space is already expected to be like, come in and meet a person and find out about them and then connect with them afterward. Like the space is always set up for that, which I think is amazing. You may have to like navigate which spaces you're more comfortable with and where you can actually find the most value. But either way, you're going to go and find like-minded people or somebody who's going to be able to give you that connection or that piece of advice, or just like a person to go and hang out and get a drink later. Being able to have those people kind of gives you also the space to find someone that has the skills that you're looking to gain and be comfortable in asking them those questions that you may not be comfortable asking at work. And having that connection. One of my closest friends, like I reached out to her and kind of forced her to be my friend because me and her were in the same position. We were in a couple of the same groups, and I was able to ask her about her experience and just be like, cool, so if I'm doing this and this and this, and she's like, that's completely normal. I'm like, oh, thank God, because I thought I was just completely wrong or doing all of this. So being able to find that even just like in my workspace, and then being able to figure out how to build that in more of a social space, because everybody is generally like just looking for connection. And whether that's professional connection or personal connection, you see that, and people are striving and thriving to have it in their everyday life. So being able to go and like find that in my everyday life and then come back and transfer that into the community that we're trying to build is a huge asset for me, and like why I appreciate communities and the things that we build from it.
And you're a community specialist. So when you're talking about like-minded people, let's bring it back to her, because that's a very specific community. What is the mission of her?
Sure. So her exists to connect queer women and people together in a space that they may not have met each other before. So we kind of work similar to Tinder or Bumble in the social space. You go in and a lot of people come on to date and find relationships and find their partners. App is set up just like swipe left, swipe right, etc. We have a Pinterest style look currently, and we're getting ready to do a big update there. So people come in and can do that. But on our profiles, you also have an icon to add friends. So we initially started off as solely a lesbian dating app. And then as more people joined and as more people started to find these different connections, we built up and we're like, okay, I feel like we need to make this more of a social aspect. Let's make it for a space to add friends and like make these connections in their areas. Then we were like, cool, everybody's kind of staying on their phone. We need to get them to meet in person. So then we started throwing events. And we were like, let's take that online experience offline, and you can actually meet these people at our parties where, you know, you came in, and we always had a pre-meet so that anybody could come in and who didn't have somebody to go with or didn't have a +1 or was new to the area, they could come meet the team, meet all of these other people, have a crew, come to the party. At each of our parties, we always had some sort of like icebreaker or game happening so that it wasn't just like come, rave, drink. So we always have that as a part of our parties as well, and like some form of entertainment. So it kind of fits the mold of like different personalities that could come in and have a full experience. So then we were like, okay, parties are doing great. How else can we do this? So then we added online communities, which are similar to kind of like a Facebook or a Twitter look. You go in, you join these groups, and the groups are either based off of like different identities or different interests. So we have a queer women of color group, we have a strong and single group, we have a mindfulness and well-being group, and you can go in and join as many as you want and be able to find like connections in that area as well. So those are kind of how the app works. And as I talked about that, I can't remember the second part of your question.
My second part is, because this sounds cool, and this is also jogging my memory, that I downloaded her when it was a dating app.
Yeah.
Yes. See, that's what's jogging my mind, because I kept being like, her, how do I know this? Was this a movie? Why is this coming to mind? So the second part of my question is, why do you think that it's important that there are apps and spaces like her out there for the queer women community?
Well, the whole purpose of why her was created was because those online spaces didn't exist. People would go and kind of take what they had built for gay men, paint it pink, and say, here you go. And behaviors and actions and interactions are not the same between queer women and gay men, like in any way, shape, or form. So being able to come into a space where we have adjusted our user experience to people who this fits toward, and not something that is just like a second handover to this community, is great and empowering, and kind of provides that void with the fact that these in-person spaces with lesbian bars and places just like generally closing, this is providing that like connection to be like, okay, we can't go out to these spaces. All of our parties are kind of disappearing. How else can we find connection? And then you come onto this app where it's like, oh my gosh, I probably went to this one party and I saw half of these people that I'm swiping by actually in the wild and in person. So being able to still keep these online spaces, especially because apps and everything are thriving, although it doesn't, 100% complete a space that's like physical and you can go and actually be like tangible in it, it definitely is there and it finds that support. And especially for people who live in areas that like fully don't have access, this is their way to like come in and be like, cool, I can find these connections, I can find these resources, I can find these places that are nowhere near me to be able to have the same connection.
For folks who are listening who are, straight and everything like that, not that there's anything wrong with that, but for my straight listeners, and I tell this to my straight friends, and I've said this fact before, and they're always shocked. They're like, what? I tell them in San Francisco, there's no lesbian bar. And you know how San Francisco is supposed to be the Mecca, we're supposed to bow west and everything, but not even San Francisco, which is supposed to be super gay, doesn't even have a lesbian bar. And now I've talked about this with my friends before, and I want your opinion. Why do you think gay bars, the gay male bars, are still active? They're still doing well, while the lesbian bars have kind of gone under or disappeared or become just like a monthly dance party?
Yeah, so that was completely true. Like only recently did Jolene's open as a queer bar here. And, you go in and you see it because she threw U-Haul, which used to be like a monthly party and became a weekly party. And now she's able to open a space, which is amazing. And the way that she's done it has been great to see in that. And why these spaces need to exist, I think they don't, because a lot of the background that we kind of look in has always kind of been dominated by gay male culture, and even how we look at apps and you see the different behaviors that go between a gay male app and a queer woman app. You go to these bars and the behaviors are different. Like queer women are not going to drink as much. Different sizing, different composition, the things that are going to be there, like they just weren't able to kind of like hold a consistent support. I think we have this huge comparison to seeing like gay boy culture and what is happening there. And you go in and this is what their parties look like and do all of these things. And I think everybody kind of has an expectation that it needs to be at that level or higher. And so when they go into like a lesbian bar and they see that like, oh, this is kind of like, okay, it's fun, but it's okay. It's not at the caliber of this. So then they continue to go back. And really what we need to be doing is like throwing our support that way and finding ways to like be in touch and connect and be that support, because these spaces are going to continue disappearing if we're not able to continue going or continue thriving or continue supporting. And it does make it really hard when just like the funds aren't there, the general support isn't there. Like even like brands, Absolute Vodka, these different things, like we'll go and see these different areas and kind of cater it towards gay male because it's fun, it's bright, it's vibrant, it's full of drag queens, it's doing all of these things. And then I think they think the opposite of that for women. I think that's like a tale as old as time, with being like, oh, well, men are doing this and women are doing this, and here's why this kind of balance is there. And I think we need to just be able to go into our community and find more of that support and rallying around these areas and finding ways to connect there.
One of the big topics in tech is user experience. And now for you, since you're in the tech field, there is diversity in the tech field, but it's still something where in Silicon Valley and in these top companies, their main recruitment source is like a university like Stanford and everything. So when it comes to creating a queer user experience that's centered on women, does it come into play where it's something where you guys have to co-create this? Is it something where you can take sort of the generic user experience and, maybe not slap pink on it, but, slap a rainbow and see how it does? Like, how does user experience with your community, how does that shake out? How do you make an app that feels like a place that is a community, that is replacing a community center or a bar or, a resource table? How do you build that user experience?
Yeah, definitely. One key thing is like, we definitely have to go out and like put ourselves in those spaces. There's meetups, there's online groups, there's discussions everywhere, there's the L word, there's spaces that we've seen to be able to go and say like, okay, cool, this is kind of what we need to replicate, this is what we need to do. Not everything we try to accomplish is like reinventing the wheel, because dating apps are around and they are already doing the things. And so in terms of looks and whatever that is, we don't need to go and completely reinvent something, but we need to lean on the gayness and the queerness that we have within the community and what they're looking for. The great thing is that if you go and ask people, people are generally very open to responding. Everybody's open to feedback. Everybody's open to writing that review or being able to say it, especially if you put yourself in those spaces. So I know like when I got started, I was in a ton of meetup groups from like all over the country. And they were probably like, why is this girl from Virginia in this group that's all the way over here in Arizona? And I was just like, oh, well, got to see what's going on. Got to see what's happening. We show up to parties all the time. And, if we're throwing parties, we need to show up to other parties. We show up to sporting events and we hear what people are asking for and what people are looking for. So being able to just go and kind of take those notes and build from there. Like even now we have an advisory group that we lean on from LGBTQ plus professionals and people who run amazing groups and are just in the corporate world. So it's all different styles of people and responses that they give as well. We reach out to the community a ton to be like, cool, you like this, you hated this, you love this, you want more of this, tell us more, fill it out. I'm in the app constantly like asking questions and seeing what's happening. I play sports with a bunch of queer leagues, so I sit and pay attention to like what they liked and disliked, what they're looking for out of all of these apps. It's a lot of like on the ground motion, but you have to do that if you're going to make it a solid product.
Now, with being a very queer app, how is that when you guys are going to these places to get funding or going to conferences or going to these tech functions and being the only queer app there? What I assume, like, at least for me, I don't like to say that there are stupid questions, but on occasion I have heard quite a few of them from, I want to say, charitably well-meaning people who maybe just don't know stuff. But how does that play out when you guys take this very queer app into this startup space?
There are definitely lots of questions. Lots of people see it and they're just like, yeah, that sounds great, but what about this and this and this and this and this and this? A lot of the times people generally, we're in this world now where it's so much more accepting to be LGBTQ plus, and we're out there and we're wearing our flags proud and doing everything, and it's growing, but it's obviously not like we're not done growing and we're not done putting ourselves into these spaces. I always love going into these spaces where people have never heard of our app or it is a predominantly straight room, because it's an opportunity to teach, it's an opportunity to advocate, and it's an opportunity for them to become an advocate for a space that they didn't even realize was, one, needed, or two, there. And to go in and just like see their faces as you kind of respond to some of these questions that a lot of people like, they'll ask it, and if they have coworkers or friends there, they'll be like, oh my God, you can't ask that. And I'd be like, no, actually you can. And I will answer it. We've hosted like dinner parties with founders and CEOs of different like startups and healthcare experiences, and we'll take them through like the alphabet, things that they can do to better improve their product and do these things. And so a lot of the times they'll ask us these questions, but then my favorite thing to do is also ask them back. That's why I can be like, cool, so here's what I'm doing for the queer community. What are you doing? How does your company work with it? How are you hiring? How are you doing this with your app? Are you using pronouns? Are you doing any of this? And these are things, and they're just like, we never even thought about it. And I'm like, think about the employees that you have. Like, their personal lives are their personal lives. So whether they're out and proud or if they're still in the closet, like being able to even just provide the space for them and understand like a new way of being able to like interact or engage is something that you can just kind of pinpoint into their mind while you talk to them. So it's always fun for me to see their reactions when I mention like what the app does and how we're connecting to the community.
That is fabulous, because I know that your experience working with employers is different than mine, because you're, in a larger city, but I organized the first transgender-focused employment expo in Arizona history. And I really expected when I reached out to employers, because Arizona is really conservative, that I would get pushback. But I found that even folks who like mom and pop places with landscapers and stuff, people might not have known the terms, but employers were actually pretty open. A lot of them were like, you know what, I really don't care as long as someone shows up on time and does the job. So we're getting close to the end of the episode, and I want to transition a little bit as somebody who does hiring, who works with these companies. What is some advice that you can give for companies who want to become startups, who want to become more queer inclusive?
Yeah, definitely. One of the key things is just not going and assuming. I think when people don't know something, the questions that they tend to ask go around their knowledge of like the question marks that they have. When going into hiring, I would say even having just like a basic understanding of generally being able to give the option of something as simple as, hey, what are your pronouns? And being able to like sit and just respect that is a great practice for when you're bringing people in. Also, don't just go along the general avenues of recruiting. There are so many groups out there that you can reach out to get connections to more diverse candidates. And especially going to different queer groups, there's a ton. I'm in at minimum like 8 or 9 queer people in tech groups that are all, and yes, I'm in the Bay Area, but it's like, hey, these are like queer women of color in tech. There are queer trans people of color in tech. There are all these different groups that you can reach out to, and they have job boards and they have people that you can connect to, and they have those opportunities there. So I'd say like reach outside of that bubble to find those candidates so that you can actively bring them into these spaces. Show up to places like Lesbians Who Tech. where they have all of them in one room. They have all of these wonderful queer people that are going to show up and do all these things. Find those conferences that are there because they are there and you're able to do it. Like if somebody isn't able to go and do a quick Google search, it's just kind of laziness in my opinion. So they are all there. And then just being aware of, as you're talking to a candidate, you're talking to a general person and not being biased about their experience or their identity or anything like that. And being sure that, as you go through the process and you are able to like make sure that they have a chance to speak up and out and reflect and possibly get feedback from the person being like, hey, did this feel okay? Or did we hold a good standard of like conversation, things like that, that you can also reflect on yourself if this is like a new area for you to dig into. But there are always spaces. And I always just tell people, I'm like, I've raced someone where I stopped them and was like, let's see how fast you can Google something that is like more LGBTQ plus friendly in terms of hiring. And let's see how long it takes. And we were able to find it like within a minute. And I'm like, cool. Have you ever used this avenue? And they're like, no. And I'm like, use it because that's there. Or find the person who runs the group and reach out to them and be like, hey, how can I take steps to reach out to this community? And always, 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 like if you're writing up a job description, make sure a second or third pair of eyes, especially if you have somebody who's like a friend who's queer or in that space, review your job description because you could put in phrasing in there that would automatically turn somebody off and have them not want to apply just based off the language used in your job description. So those are like, I would say like basic starting points of hiring, in my opinion.
I like that, especially that last part, because a lot of people don't understand why they keep getting bro grammars, but all they do is fill their job descriptions with bro language.
Yes.
It's like copyright.
All bro language.
Oh my God, so true. You know what? You have given so much fabulous information. I know that we were all over the place, and I know people listening are just like, man, we learned about, Shana in Australia. We learned about doing this community building and then how it's like to be queer startup that could in Silicon Valley. And I've been enjoying the journey, but I want to make sure for the folks listening, if they want to find out more about her, they want to find out more about you, where do they go?
Yep. So we have a full website, www.weareher, so WEAREHER.com. You can find all of our details and things there. I'm on LinkedIn. So the way that my name is spelled on this podcast with one M in my last name in Sumers, I'm probably the only one spelled like that on LinkedIn. And if I'm not, it's my family member. So you can always reach out to me there. I'm more than happy to speak with anyone. And we are on all social media at Her Social App, and you can go follow us there.
Yay! Well, dude, you know what, Shana, this was fabulous. I enjoyed our talk, and I hope that everybody who is curious, go check out her and take some of this to heart, because what I have noticed in my time doing this podcast, being a career coach, and having to be a scrappy millennial job seeker myself, is that community, networking, just having those connections, because it's not just going to help you find that next job. It also creates that synergy that happens when you're talking to a like-minded person about your passion or your career, and there's true serendipity that can happen. So, you know what? Thank you so much for being on my show today.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Definitely co-sign on all the things that you just said about community. It's like the number one space. If you show up in these spaces, then you're only going to benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that. And thank you again. And thank you all for listening. As always, I'm Sami Gardner, and this was the Career Kickstart Show. Bye. Change your career, change your life at CareerKickstartAcademy.com.